Hello, hi there. So, carrying on from my last video about strikes and Christmas, I'm on my way home. Luckily, I'm driving. I won't be looking at the camera, but thank God I'm not trying to get a train home from Sheffield to South Wales. Although I do need to get a train later from Carmarthen to Bridgends. Now, I have heard already that there's some horrendous cancellations on trains. There's some many delays. So I think the Mick the Lynch the Grinch and his union boys are they've achieved what they wanted to do, which was to totally fuck up Christmas. Let's be basic about it for the average person. As I said in my previous video, a horrible week last week, we're going on strike. This week they're not on strike, but with the amount of disruption that's happened with the weather, with the amount of sick leave that they're all on the bloody sick, and the amount of irregularity of the service, it's been pretty horrendous getting around the country. As I said before, I don't feel so sorry for myself. I'm working, I'm a big boy, but there's really awful situations where kids have not been able to get the parties, where people have cancelled their Christmas festivities, really affecting people's festivities, but also poor businesses who have lost millions yet again after two shite Christmases they've had. They've lost money again because of these striking RMT, the train drivers. The train drivers actually for ASLEF have just decided again that they're going to come out on strike. The poor people on £70,000 a year, they're striking again now in the new year. And of course Mick Lynch hasn't given up. He's set out strikes in the next couple of weeks as well, just to make the new year more miserable. So it's a standoff. Steve Barclay, the Conservative Secretary of State, has quite clearly said he's not going to go into ridiculous negotiations. There are ways and means. There's platforms designed for the negotiations. Of course, the nurses are back today. They've had their strike yesterday and a couple of days, but they're planning more industrial action. They think they've on a window, which fair play. You know, the country is behind the nurses in general. I think it's something like 70% of people who think the nurses should get a pay rise. However, if you ask people should they get 19%, I don't think there would be 60 or 70% say that. We all know that is pie in the sky, and it really is crazy. And I'm sorry, as much as we value our nurses and the health workers, you go throwing around the rises like that, or even 15% is out of the question. They've got to come to senses. Something like 8 or 9%, which would be a reasonable offer. At the end of the day, you know, they've got a tough job, and nurse retention, they keep going about, they're leaving the service. Well, the reason they're leaving the bloody service is because lots of them are going to work for agencies. And only yesterday I've checked some figures. 46% of nurses in this country actually work for the NHS. The rest work for private companies and agencies. And of course they're on big money. So all these nurses, half nurses, are on big money. I was up on £20, £30 an hour. And of course, a lot of the NHS nurses work for agencies in their spare time. Now, I think this is disloyal. I think if a nurse is going to get a 10% or 14% rise, whatever, they should sign an agreement they will never work for an agency. Last year, the government spent £6 billion employing agency staff in the NHS. £6 billion. So you can see where this seepage of money, this big bottomless pit. I mean, the NHS had 3.4% more funding this year than it did last year. So there's money going into this NHS, but the wastage is incredible. I know some terrible stories of wastage in the NHS, with procurement, and people with jobs which aren't jobs, where they sit around doing nothing because there's no work, but they don't want to lose the jobs because it'll affect their budgets for next year. Some horrendous stories. So let's get some sensible businessmen with business brains into the NHS to manage it properly, cut out the wastage, cut out the dramatic over-management and mismanagement, and let's get in the new year, some common sense into our public services. We've got to pay them, we know, and there's a crisis in the NHS, we know we've got to pay, and we all know, but money doesn't come out of thin air, so we're all going to have to pay more tax for this. anytime we give nurses or doctors or paramedics or anyone else extra money, it comes from ourselves. We pay it in taxes. The paramedics have just called off their strikes for mid-Christmas, which is good news. To be honest, I think they're a clever move really, because they now take the moral high ground. You can't help thinking they've had some horror stories of transpired from the other day when they were on strike. So let's look for a new year where it's not strikes all the bloody time. These strikes are affecting people. They're going to hold down this country. They might cost lives, they might cost, certainly will cost a lot of inconvenience to the average punter. Let's get this sorted. But this old mantra, let's sit around the table. Yes, sit around the table. But if you're coming to the table with ridiculous 90% pay rises, then it's not worth sitting around the table with you. I'm sorry. A little bit of common sense on both sides perhaps is called for. So I wish you all a Merry Christmas from me, Paul, and in the new year we'll talk more about the issues that are important in Wales and around the UK. Thank you very much.